Afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Ireland. I'm Chair of the Planning Applications Committee. I'd like to welcome you to this predetermination hearing. Open the welcome out to all the elected members that are here today with us. Before we begin, I'd just like to make everyone aware that the meeting will be shown live on the internet. Also be stored in the Council's webcast archive and will be available for viewing at a later date. I have the discretion to suspend or stop filming if, in my opinion, allowing filming to be continued would affect the proceedings of the meeting. Can I remind you that microphones must be switched on before you start to speak and switched off immediately when finished speaking. We have here today from the officers present are Sean McDade, Principal Planner, Graham Shankland, Principal Business Intelligence Officer, Ian Walker, Senior Planner, John Marley, Transportation Oh, sorry, I've just been told John's not here. We have Paul O'Neill, who's the Clerk of the Committee, and Eamon Daly, who's Clerk to the Council, and Andy Carhill, Environment, is here. I'm going to run through just what's going to happen quickly before we actually open out the meeting. I'm going to invite Sean to give a brief overview of the development proposal before us today. The applicant agent has indicated that they do not wish to speak today, so there is nobody from the applicant or any supporting officer here today for them, so we will not be hearing from them. I will then invite the representatives of the objectors to speak, and they'll be given 5 minutes each. Now, after each person's came up and spoken, I'm going to open it out to the floor and see if anyone has any questions or comments for each person as they come up. That is going to conclude the public part of the meeting, so we're going to move on to the consideration by the report of handling and by the committee in front of us today. I will invite the committee at that stage to give any comments that they have. They can question the officers on the terms of the report before us. At the conclusion of that, we'll move to recommend or otherwise at the conclusion. I'd like first to turn to Sean to give us a brief overview of the development proposal.
Just a couple of preliminaries through you, Chair. In terms of the report for apologies for absence, Provost Fletcher, Councillor Buchanan, Councillor Grant and Councillor McLean have intimated their apologies for the meeting.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest today from any of the members on the committee? No. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn to yourself.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. This application is before the committee because it's a major development as the site area exceeds 2 hectares. It's also subject to this predetermination hearing because the Council's Planning Service considers it to be a significant departure from the development plan, i.e. in terms of we have sufficient housing land identified in the adopted local development plan up to the period 2025. On the papers in front of you, an assessment against the relevant national, local policies and any material planning considerations is made on pages 12 through to 26, and the recommendation of the application is made on page 26 as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDade. Can I actually now invite Mr. Tom Lagan to approach, please? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Lagan, can I remind you, you speak in support of your representation and that you cannot introduce any new material at this point?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, can I set the scene a wee bit just for the community?
Absolutely, you have 5 minutes, so certainly.
Okay. So we're here today. My name's Tom. We have Brian and Kirsty. And we're here to represent the local community on the proposed site. On behalf of the local community, we've had the decision that we would speak. We'll each discuss certain topics. So the Brownside and Boylston estates are a nice place to live, and part of what makes them a nice place to live is the surrounding green belt. It is a close-knit community where you find several generations of each family. This community values the green belt at Ferrynees. As a local community, we are extremely worried and angry about the planning application from Gladman Developments. While we're happy that the Council recommendation within this report is to refuse the application, we think that additional reasons for refusal should be included within the comments for refusal that have not been assessed and captured. As I have said, the community are angry and frustrated about the application. This can be clearly demonstrated with this here petition that we have for 514 local residents who have signed this, which tells us a story that the local neighbourhood do not want this application. Also in the Barrhead News this week was 100 residents stood together in a photo and early on a Saturday morning took the time out to demonstrate against this site. With this report, it says there has been a substantial number of objections, a total of 170 letters. That is local residents who have taken the time to write to the Council to vent their anger and voice their frustration at this application. Not one submission from to the Council supported this application. So 170 against, 0 for. Safety. As a local resident, I am strongly opposed to this development and see no benefit to our local community. Building on this greenbelt land contradicts many policies within your own local development plan. All local kids play in this area, this estate, as it's in a built-up hill. So the kids are playing on this grass area. Building houses on this area will then force these kids to play on the streets, giving more of a risk to be knocked down. As kids play in this area, taking away this land will then force kids to play nearer the existing quarry, which is a site of SSI. The traffic in the area will be increased dramatically, as we'll have circa two cars per household, which are already narrow and crowded streets. If approved, the disruption works and traffic will be a major safety risk for heavy plant machinery and trucks going up and down the narrow streets. The main access to the proposed development is Brownside Avenue. As many people in this room know, in the winter time, when it's snow and ice come along, we can't get our cars up the hill. Introduction of another 100 cars will just compound this issue, and more people will have to abandon their cars down the bottom of the hill. Introduction of a SUD to the proposed development will introduce a risk of drowning for young kids who will be curious and will want to play near it. Even if fenced off, this will not stop kids being curious and being kids. 391 people drowned in the UK in 2015. Why introduce such a risk? The views and impact. The area plays an important role in forming the backdrop of Barrhead. Gladman Developments have submitted an illustrative view. This view will impact on the trees and bushes a lot more than what they have illustrated. I have personally been out and stood next to the trees and matched up their plans, and it is falsifying the information. This area is a greenbelt site and recognises that it plays an important part in the community. The area is an important area for recreation. Kids play in the area, people walk their dogs, people go for walks, people stable horses, and people enjoy observing the wildlife, which Kirsty will come on a bit later, especially the deer who come down to the gardens. Also, the school class sizes are already under strain, and this will impact even more. The impact of proposing this area of greenbelt land for development in an area adjacent to 2 local biodiversity sites and actually going over the top of one of them, also the site adjacent to a quarry and geological SSI. Providing Gladman back with consent of building the proposed site in Barrhead would be very much against the strategy set out by the Council in 2015 Local Development Plan. This site was also removed from the existing Local Development Plan, and that decision should be upheld. Gladman Development are not a local company, and have no interest in what the community have to say or what the future looks for this site, or how it impacts the community. They are just looking for planning approval so they can sell the land on to a builder and move on to their next green belt project. I would urge East Renfrewshire Council to reject the unwanted proposal from the local community and not consider this site as part of the East Renfrewshire Local Development Plan.
Thank you very much, Mr Lagan. Oh, sorry, if you just remain just one wee second. I'm just going to open it out to the committee. If anyone's got any questions or comments they want to make to Mr Lagan at this stage. Oh, yes, Councillor Devlin.
Just a question in regards to the planning status and the history of the site. I believe in 2010 the Scottish Government recommended through the reporter and the Scottish Government that this ground, which was Greenbelt, was to be used for housing needs, right? Then in 2013, that decision was overturned and they made it Greenbelt. Just it's a point, Tom, but it's a very important point. But the decision then was binding. So surely that decision now is still binding. It can't be changed from a Greenbelt.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah. Can we please come back to that when we? But I'd very much like that question to be asked. Yeah. But when I open it out all to the full committee, can you please come back in with problem. That? I'd really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Councillor Devlin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Robb. I just remind you, again, it's just not to introduce any new information at this point. Thank you.
Okay, understood. Is the microphone on? Yes. Right. I was pleased to see the Planning Office's report recommending rejection primarily based on the non-compliance with the Strategic Development Plan and Local Development Plan. I believe there are several representations listed in the report that should have been allocated more importance than they have. One, windfall site, referenced by Gladman. Under the representation section, reference is made to the compliance with the glossary term in the LDP, non-allocated sites that come forward for development and contribute to land supply. The definition mirrors the glossary term in the Scottish Government website. However, there is an expanded definition in Scottish Government document 2/2010 titled Affordable Housing Land Notes. Clause 6.2 states, windfall sites arise unexpectedly, similar to the glossary in the non-allocated sites. Continuing, these are opportunities for new housing involvement, the reuse or redevelopment of previously developed sites, i.e. brownfield sites which are not included within the development plan. A different definition that is. As this is an official government document, I assume vetted and approved before issue, this definition would invalidate the current site being defined as a windfall site as it has had no previous development. Secondly, traffic generation referred to in Council's road services with no objection. Gladman commissioned a report by PBA, and by reference to this and WYG design statement, there are contradictions which cast doubt on their robustness. Referencing the junction of Brownside Avenue, Caplet Hill Road, the WYG document indicates suitable visibility displays, whilst in contrast PBA indicate visibility restrictions by signage to the north, which considered significant and should be addressed by moving signs. PBA indicate Brownside Avenue is approximately 7 metres wide, which it may be at Caplet Hill Road junction, but by measurement, for the most part, it is only 5.5 metres. That's also confirmed in the WYG document. That's 20% reduction in width from what PBA quote. Assessment by PBA as to construction traffic and traffic flow must be badly compromised by this error. It's reported that East Renfrewshire has higher than average car ownership, cross stops area even higher. PBA parking allocation statement associated with a new development recognises this between 1.65 to 3.10 cars per house size dependent. They, however, only consider 1 car per house when assessing traffic flow from the development. Again, a significant flaw in basic data, along with road width restrictions. Thereafter, they indicate that whilst most cars will exit at Brownside Avenue, Caplet Hill Road, to mitigate congestion here, they propose cars will also exit via Boylston and Quarry Roads. This seems to be promoting rat runs through narrow streets of the existing development, increasing risk to residents. Utilising Quarry Road entails cars passing Cross Atherley Primary School, which has had issues previously involving police traffic management input due to numbers of cars from out with the area dropping off and collecting children, and the inherent dangers to children due to traffic congestion. It is as a minimum grossly negligent of PBA not to recognise this issue, and at worst downright dangerous in considering this as an acceptable traffic route. Potential flooding and drainage. The Council have referred these issues to SEPA and Scottish Water. Gladman commissioned Indy Consult and Mason Evans to report on topography, hydraulics and construction, and along with references to Scottish Water and SEPA, there is no recognition of significant flood risk associated with the site. In fact, Mason Evans state that present surface runoff from the site would be relatively low given the site is surfaced in rough grass and trees. The assessment seems to have been used to calculate drainage, including SUDs, along with increased risk from global warming issues. This is a grossly flawed base assessment, as the site has significant runoff issues affecting local properties and roads. 2 references: communication with Mr. G.T. Marchetti, Area Engineer, Strathclyde Regional Council, an article in the Extra, March 2007, regarding property damage. The latter reference contains an excellent photograph of runoff taking the form of a rivulet running down from the site. With the base knowledge of runoff problems missing, it must be questionable if the calculations referencing SUDs and drainage can be robust. As such, there must also be a high risk of stored soil wash-off during construction when the current issues go unrecognised, risking a similar situation to the landslip that previously experienced in the hillside area of Barhead. Possible contamination on site referred to Environmental Health, who recommend a ground investigation report. The Indy Consult and Mason Evans reports indicate potential contamination by cadmium, copper, mercury and lead from possible infill from Boylston Quarry. They recommend contamination testing to be undertaken if infill is found. This goes beyond the Environmental Health Report recommendations, but nowhere has anyone addressed the use of specialists or how compliance with national requirements will be achieved to prevent contamination affecting local properties and residents if the referenced pollutants are found and require removal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robb. I'll open it out to the committee if anyone's got any questions for Mr. Robb at this point. Councillor Convery.
Hi, thank you, Chair. It was just to make a comment with regards to the no objections from the Roads Department. I myself was very surprised that there was no objection, because when I was up there on Saturday myself, there was maybe 2 or 3 extra cars that was not than what's normally there for the meeting, and it was very obvious that there wasn't very much room for manoeuvre just with those small amount of cars.
It's a very minimal width, and as I say, it has been reported by the commissioned reports. Over and above that, there are issues to do with the view aspect and leaving the Brownside, and as I've said, the reports indicate taking cars through the current development, which I believe is dangerous, particularly Cross Atherley, where there's a history, probably recorded, as I said, through police involvement. And that's not going to be better than what it previously was with increasing cars anyway. So I believe there are significant issues relative to the whole area of the development. The development is restricted to one access point, which is Brownside Avenue, hasn't got multi-access points.
Mr. Robb, can I just confirm something with you? You mentioned that the road is put in the report from PBA as 7 metres, but you said, I didn't quite catch it in time, is it 5.5 metres?
5.5, I specifically measured that. It could be 7 down at the point where Brownside joins Capitol Hill because it opens out. It could be that, but certainly most of Brownside is 5.5, and the WYG report indicates that it's extended, that 5.5 will be extended as the road width into the new development. So they recognise that and report it.
Okay.
So there's a contradiction, and that's for 20% down in road width.
Thank you very much. No, just I wasn't sure that I'd caught that at 5.5. Does anyone else have any questions or comments to Mr. Robb? Yes, Councillor Bamford.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you. I was there on Saturday, and your concerns about the road to me were twofold. I came up with Councillor Convery and a couple of other councillors to have a look at the site, and not only would I be concerned about the construction traffic going up that road, as eventually, if houses are built on it, the safety of the children, because it is very narrow, as my fellow councillor said. We went up there with an extra couple of cars, and I couldn't even park on the road. I had to park in a side street because there just wasn't enough room. So I'm a bit concerned if they're representing it as being 7.5 metres, because it certainly didn't appear to be that wide.
They represent PBA say approximately 7. WYG, again, another commission report, says 5.5 as extended into, and I assure you I went up and measured it with my wife. 5.5.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robb.
Again,
yeah?
Just slightly add, I've tried to respect
just very briefly, please. We need to move on. Thank you.
What I'd originally also said, and to bring it to the board on the traffic, particularly in construction traffic, I also believe there's a potential hazard coming from the Paisley direction turning into Brownside. There is a bend in the road and heavy, slow-moving construction traffic having to come into that. None of those reports recognise that either.
Okay, thank you very much. That is all noted. Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. Can we have, is it Ms Menzies, please?
Hello.
Hello, thank you. Hello, welcome. Just to remind you again, not to introduce any new material at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay. I have to say that the major objection to this development is that it would be built on richly biodiverse land, which is zoned in the local development plan as Green Belt and part of the Green Network. The preliminary ecological assessment submitted by Gladman is a very poor representation of the biodiversity of the site. What their survey describes as improved grassland is actually a species-rich, semi-natural lowland grassland. The greater butterfly orchid is an indicator species for this kind of grassland, and perhaps the most significant species at Ferrynees, and is found in large populations across the site. There are local biodiversity action plans for this type of grassland and the orchid, and these state that this grassland is extremely rare within the local biodiversity action plan partnership area, and that the priorities are to ensure that no further loss of the orchid occurs at known areas of high species diversity. The greater butterfly orchid is also listed in the Scottish Biodiversity List under the category Conservation Action Needed. Gladman's ecological survey did not mention any of this. Their field survey was done on the 26th of April 2017, but the guidelines recommended for this type of habitat is that it should be surveyed between May and September, and as the guidelines cover the whole of the UK, and the growing season, as you know, in central Scotland is a month behind England, then it would be more appropriate to survey the field in June at the earliest, and at several points after that through the growing season. The field also has a marshy area which provides a habitat for amphibians, including frogs, toads and newts, whose UK numbers are declining. The common toad is on the Scottish Biodiversity List under Avoid Negative Impacts. The amphibians were not mentioned in Gladman's survey. Pipistrelle bats are also found feeding at the grassland and are listed on the Scottish Biodiversity List under Avoid Negative Impacts. so removing this feeding ground would have a negative impact on all of these species. Development at this site goes against a number of strategic policies in the local development plan, particularly policy D3, D4 and D8, which control development in the green belt and the protection and enhancement of wildlife, recreational, landscape and access value of the green networks, SSSIs and biodiversity sites. Gladman have paid lip service to these policies in their master plan. They offer a network of paths. However, these are based on rough tracks which already exist and are used by local people. Gladman also propose mitigation, such as planting native trees and wildflowers. However, these measures could not compensate for the loss of these specialised habitats, which are a remnant of our rural heritage, adapted to particular conditions and on which wildlife depends. The field is bounded by houses to the north and by the Boylston Quarry, site of special scientific interest, and the Harelaw Brae local biodiversity site to the south. In fact, the development would encroach on this biodiversity site, which is an area of woodland scrub supporting a wide range of plants and animals. There is also a local biodiversity site on the other side of the Harelaw Burn, where there is a long-term project to enhance the habitat for the lesser white-throat, which is a type of bird. The proposed development would compromise the integrity of all of these sites. Now, Scottish Natural Heritage, in their response, suggested erecting a fence to protect the site of scientific interest, but this would not minimise the disturbance to peregrine falcons that are nesting in the quarry, and they hunt on the grassland. And other bird life will also be nesting in the woodland and feeding in the grassland. So we have recorded 12 red list and 12 amber list birds of conservation concern at the field. And these include 6 birds listed on the Scottish Biodiversity List under the category Conservation Action Needed. These lowland grasslands are an important food source for grazing animals, pollinators and other insects and birds. The mosaic of different habitats across the site are important for species to interact for foraging, commuting and shelter. They also offer the opportunity for people to see wildlife like deer and foxes and to interact with nature, which is beneficial for mental and physical health. Policy 8 of the Strategic Development Plan only permits developments like this on greenbelt land if it contributes to sustainable development or helps remedy a shortfall in housing supply. The reality of the steep walk up the hill means that people do not walk or use the buses even when the stops are nearby, and especially when shops and services are so far away. So the development would encourage car use, and so it is not a sustainable site. Neither is there a shortfall in the housing supply. The 2017 Housing Land Audit has found that there is an 8% surplus in the development plan. The Ferrynees site was not listed in the main issues report and so is not included in these figures. There is currently residential developments within 1 mile of the site, 96 homes currently being built at Blackbyres, and applications submitted for 400 to 500 homes at Shanks Park, which is a brownfield site. And there's many other developments across Barrhead, so there is no justification for building on this greenbelt site. Rather than approving a needless development, I would urge the Council to realise the significance of the grassland habitat and the biodiversity of the entire site and investigate that and look at having it designated as an SSSI or at least as a site important for nature conservation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I open it out to any questions on the matters that are being brought up, specific questions or comments before I close the part of the public part of the meeting today? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you to coming along, the representatives, and that concludes the public part of the meeting. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm just going to move on now so that we can consider the representations we've heard today and the report of handling in front of us. Sorry. I'm going to invite Sean McDade to just quickly go through it, and then I'm going to open up to the members of the committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A very important consideration in determining this application is the current adopted local plan policies, and primarily the housing land supply issue. We, as I said earlier on, we have sufficient and a generous housing land supply identified in the local plan up to the period 2025. As part of that, we identified large-scale urban release or greenbelt release sites for urban expansion areas at Newton Mearns, Mallet Shaw area and the Barhead South area. So in terms of taking a plan-led approach, there is actually no numerical need for extra housing on this site. It doesn't meet this, well, it's the least favoured in the sequential approach to identifying sites, where Scottish Government policy and local plan policies require the identification of urban brownfield sites to be developed in the first instance. You look at urban greenfield sites, and then as a last resort, you would look at edge of settlement or greenbelt sites. So this site is the least favoured in that sequential approach. But to emphasise again, the local plan has sufficient housing land supply up to 2025, and there is no requirement for us to recommend approval of this application or to allow the development of this site at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr McDade. Can I open up now to members of the committee? Councillor Convery.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to all the residents who have taken their time to attend, and to the representatives for their input. Yet again, this council finds itself discussing and the residents of the Fernies area find themselves defending this piece of land from developers. After attending the meeting on Saturday at the site along with Councillor Bamforth, I fully understand why the local community are frustrated and angry at this constant battle against developers wanting to build on land designated as Greenbelt. This development proposal goes against a number of policies in this council's local development plan. Policy D3, D4 and D8 cover the protection and enhancement of Greenbelt, limiting impact on nature conservation, integrity of local biodiversity sites and impact on the landscape character. This field is rich with wildlife. It provides feeding grounds and habitats for roe deer, foxes, pipistrelle bats, the common toad, mice, voles and other small animals, to name but a few. All live and feed on this grassland. There have been over 50 species of birds spotted in this area of Greenbelt. 12 of these birds are on the Birds of Conservation Concerns Red List and 12 on the Amber List. The swift, kestrel, herring gull, black-headed gull, the grasshopper warbler and redwing are 6 of which are listed on the Scottish Biodiversity List under the category Conservation Action Needed. There is a non-exhaustive list of plant life and flowers that all grow and thrive in this area. The wildflowers in the grassland and wetland attract bees, hoverflies, butterflies, moths, spiders, beetles and insects. These insects feed on the flowers and the plant life, and the birds and small mammals feed on the insects, and the larger mammals feed on the smaller ones, and so it goes on. So this will not just affect 1 or 2 of these species, it will have a devastating effect on them all. Are we really going to be part of destroying this beautiful and essential landscape? Policy G3 SG1 covering housing supply, the Council's main issue report of November 2016 states, the monitoring statement clearly shows that there is sufficient land supply to meet the proposed SDP2 housing land requirement by 2029. With a generous 5-year land supply for each period, there is therefore no requirement to identify further large-scale greenfield land releases within the LDP2. So there is, as it states, no requirement for this greenfield site to be used.
Councillor Covey, thank you very much. Moving, yes, yes.
Through you, Chair.
No, yes, I'm just 1 second.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think what we're going to, if you could keep statements short, and if you've got any questions at all, ask them of the short Mr McDade that's here today. But Councillor Cunningham, you're wanting to come in?
Gladman's call it a windfall site when it is actually a greenbelt site, which really affects the whole of Barrhead. It is the outline for Barrhead. Brownside Avenue is a very steep road as far as it goes. They were talking about there's no flooding, there couldn't be this. There's 3 burns up there, there's walkway, there's a golf course, and of course the drainage, does affect going on to the main road. There's a school, primary school, but above all there's a quarry there, which has been a major problem before in Barrhead, where many people have been severely injured, right, as far as the quarry went. To think about blasting in that area would affect the houses that are there at the present time. For the idea of heavy plant and machinery going up that road is absolutely ridiculous to be considered, and it is not suitable hardly for even cars going up and down, let alone heavy plant. So I'd be a wee bit really worried about the public safety, especially of the children and the elderly within that area. The over-provision for that area is, we don't need the houses. When you look round about Barrhead and what the changes and what is put forward for Barrhead, there is plenty. There is the Black Bias for the Bellway site right at the corner just off the Grahamson Road. There is the Black Bias site at the bottom of the road. There is at the top of Auchenback. There is plenty of houses being proposed for that area. My concern mainly is the fact about the cars. For to build another 50 houses or whatever, possibly you're talking about over 100 cars. My experience of Barrhead, been born and bred there, is the fact that the roads cannot take it. There's enough congestion with what we have at the present time between the Paisley Road, Blackbyres Road, Crossatherley Street, Calabar Road, right down the Barrhead Main Street, Darnley Road, and even right down to the Glasgow Road and the Hurlet. I would be worried sick because a 4-minute journey for me a week passing Friday, for the Calabar Road to Crossatherley Street, for the Robertson Street development is, should have taken me 4 minutes in my car. 25 minutes later, I got to Robertson Street. That was at 3 o'clock, just before 3 o'clock, 2:45 on a Friday afternoon. For the cars going down the Glasgow Road and everywhere else within Barrhead, our roads cannot take any more, and that area certainly cannot. And I'd be very concerned. It is a major concern for me on road safety. And I just feel as though, for me, as a development, it should never be even thought of. And it's offensive that Gladman thinks they can just put in, when we have a local development plan, that they can put in this and call it what they want to be, a windfall site, when actually it is certainly not.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to, it's been reminded that we've not to take statements, but we've to take questions on the report of handling. So moving forward, please. Yes, Councillor Devlin.
Councillor Devlin, could you actually put your...
Sorry, my apology. In 2010 it was identified for housing needs. Then the decision was overturned by the reporter who was appointed by the Scottish Government. The reporter concluded that the development of the site for housing was not necessary to provide effective, generous housing land supply. The deletion of the housing site and its designation as Greenbelt would direct development to those strategic housing sites and support the strategy of the proposed plan to protect and enhance the character of landscape setting of the settlement. The reporter considered that the provision of a more robust Greenbelt boundary alone would now not outweigh the adverse impact on the character of setting Barrhead. Basically, the reporters overturned the decision and turned it back into Greenbelt. Is that a binding decision?
Thank you very much, Councillor Devlin.
Sorry, to Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Devlin. I'd say, expand on what you said. What you said is generally correct. In 2010, through the adoption of the local plan, there were no large-scale Greenbelt releases, but the Scottish Government reporters recommended that various smaller sites would be released, including this site, including a site in Uplamore, including a site at the top end of Ayr Road in Newton Mearns, which they felt would top up the housing land supply at that time and didn't significantly offend the various national policies and local plan policies. Obviously, on page 13 of your report, the history of this site is alluded to, and yes, at that time in 2010, the reporters recommended the site be put onto the local plan, and obviously the decision on the local plan is binding. Now, obviously, as events moved on and we moved forward to the adoption of the local development plan in 2015, the site wasn't being promoted by any developer, so we as a council recommended it was taken out. So it's designated as Greenbelt land.
Sorry, that was supported by the reporter?
Yes,
is that right?
Yes.
So between the Scottish Government, reporter and the council, we have designated that as Greenbelt?
That's Greenbelt land, that's correct, Councillor. And obviously, as I said earlier on, through the adoption of the current local plan, we have large-scale urban expansion sites that meet the housing needs.
We've got plenty of ground within the vicinity. An important point is the decision binding. Can that be appealed?
The decision that you're referring to, Councillor, is about the local plan process.
Yeah, no, from the developers. Can they appeal whatever decision we take here if it went against them? Can they appeal that?
If you go with the recommendation to refuse the application, they do have a right. They can exercise the right of appeal to the Scottish ministers. Whether they exercise that right, that's up to the developer. They don't have to tell us. I don't know if they will or not.
It'd be very foolish if it's been.
I can let you know that Gladman Developments actually applied for a site in Waterfoot, a Greenbelt site, and they appealed against non-determination of that application towards the end of last year. They argued on that, in their appeal, that the council did not have sufficient housing land supply. The appointed reporter actually came down on the side of the council and said we had a generous and sufficient housing land supply for the local plan for the period. In addition, Gladman Developments submitted a judicial review against the adoption of the strategic development plan on the housing land supply issue. That decision has come out recently, and basically the judicial review was thrown out.
Good.
So, and basically the judge appointed to consider the review considered that the adoption of the strategic development plan was perfectly correct. There was no misrepresentation, and how the housing land supply was formulated and allocated to each of the constituent council areas was appropriate and right.
Yeah, the point I'm making here, between the reporter and the council, they designated this as a green belt. It wasn't just the council, so it would be very foolish for them to appeal against it, in my eyes.
Foolish company.
Thank you very much, Councillor Devlin. Yes, Councillor Mill, do you have a question for Mr McDade?
Yes, thank you. The more or less reiterating what Sean had just said. In my view, the applicant should be fully aware that in East Renfrewshire already have an adequate supply of housing land, as they have already tried and failed to convince planners to include land at Waterfoot for development. And an application I may add, which they appealed just a few weeks ago, just to reiterate what Sean had said, which they lost. Personally, I'm disgusted with this company, as they're the most selfish people I've ever come across, as they do not offer anything to the local community. They could easily have spoken to the neighbours and or community representatives to try and work with them. But if Waterfoot is anything to go by, this company offers nothing to the area. Can I now refer to page 13, as you said, specifically to the bits in the middle, where it says that the reporter undertook the examination of the LDP, and again back to council. The reporter again concluded the development of this specific site. I've even got my teeth in. This concluded that the development of this site for housing was not necessary. I think we should listen to them. I've a couple of one question specifically is that can Gladden or any other company, whether it's Wallace Land or whatever, come and just say, right, we want this piece of land and we're going to go for it? That's the question. But this company have no concept of the importance of local people in putting green belt and green network. And I have no hesitation in supporting the planning department's view that we refuse this application.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Councillor Miller. To be honest, any developer can apply for any site at any time. We have a plan-led process, and we go through a lot of work to bring forward the local plan, and eventually to bring it forward for adoption. And you would like to think that developers would accord with that, but there may be circumstances through the lifetime of the plan that allows us to recommend approval against policy, because developments, the legal test for making a planning decision is if the development accords to the development plan, it should be approved unless there are material considerations that dictate otherwise. But there is the reverse of that. If an application is contrary to the local plan, it should be refused unless there are material considerations that dictate otherwise.
But that's my point. The council planning department have worked for several years through the MIR and LDP, and yet this company decide that they want to come and go against you. To me, it's all wrong.
Yes, just for a final point of clarification, Councillor, as a material consideration, if we were at a point in time where we had insufficient housing land supply, although the site or any site is designated as greenbelt land, if we had insufficient housing land supply and it was considered to be an appropriate location for the development, we could recommend approval of the site. But in this situation, I keep going back to the point where we have sufficient and generous housing land supply for quite a period. So there's no numerical need for housing on this site at this time.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you very much. Can I just come in very, very, very quickly? Appreciate the statement you're making, Mr. Miller, but I would just ask committee maybe to refrain from direct comments about the applicant. As we move forward, it's been whispered in my. And also just to ask if there's anyone has any direct questions to Mr. McDade. Yes, Councillor Aitken.
Hi there. Just to follow up actually what Kirsty Menzies was saying earlier about the wildlife, the birds and the birds and bees, mammals. Can I just ask, is this a specially protected site for wildlife? And if it's not, could it become so? Could the council designate it as special protective of wildlife? And would that actually prevent future planning applications coming before the council?
Thank you.
I know that Ms Menzies has actually contacted Julie Nicholl, my equivalent in local plans, about extending the natural heritage designation for the site. Julie is looking at that, and it may or may not happen through the local plan process. We'd have to designate it through that process. the extension of the designation doesn't automatically preclude development. It's all about the impact of development on the designation. If it can be mitigated, species translocated, development could occur, but the banner headline of any of the policies is about protecting. There would have to be very good reason to allow development in those circumstances. There may well be an impact. It's the extent of the impact that we'd have to judge at the time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lafferty, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very briefly, we've heard some members suggesting that there has been little consultation with the community regarding this application. Now, I know it's not the role of our development planners or development control staff to steer through developments, but I've always found there's been a record of partnership working in very many cases with developers and council officers. Has there been much liaison between the applicant concerning this development with your department, Sean?
The first that my service, development management, were aware of the site coming forward was through the statutory proposal of application notice, which is the developer's statutory requirement to consult with the community. They had no discussions with my service on the application. As a general point, a site like this that comes out of left field, it can be very difficult for us to deal with when we have land designated with an adopted local plan, and it becomes problematic, and you tend to find sites like this become contentious when it comes to the actual planning application.
Thank you. Councillor Convery.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say that a lack of consultation just shows that a lack of care or thought for the residents. Right, my question is for Sean. See if it is refused today, can they continue to apply for development on this site? And if so, is there a limit to how many times developers can apply?
It's a difficult question to answer because there are contained within the Planning Act. We can decline to entertain further applications if this decision today, if the members do refuse the application, if the applicant appeals the decision, there's actually provision within the Planning Act that we can decline to determine an application within 2 years if circumstances haven't changed. We would have to decide at that time whether we would exercise that legislation. But yeah, basically an applicant can apply multiple times. They could come back for the site. I would like to think through all this that with any site that developers engage with us properly through the local plan process, and it obviously makes my job much easier down the line when there's an allocated site for housing. So that's an unknown quantity whether they would apply again or not for the site.
Councillor Cunningham.
Get it right, not to accept any more applications for a period of time. Say we said it for the next 20 years that they didn't. Could that recommendation come for this committee today? Too? Well, how does it come?
No, it's contained within the Planning Act. I have to go with what's stated in the Planning Act. I can't decline an application which is submitted.
I'm talking about making the area right that no more applications could be applied for. You said it was 2 years, right? Well, so if we asked as a committee that area that there couldn't be another application that it was designated that couldn't be accepted for the next 20 to 25 years, who would you then speak to make, to say that no application for that area would be accepted?
I don't think you can focus it on the application, Councillor. It's through the local plan process.
Right. So that could be done through the local plan.
Well, I think
requested.
I think what would happen through the local plan process is that if we continually want it to be designated as greenbelt, that would, in general terms, preclude development. Development in the greenbelt is only allowed in specific circumstances.
Hasn't it stopped them just now? They're classing it as a windfall, so we need to be very specific in what we say.
I personally don't think that you could do what you're asking, Councillor.
Well, one can only try.
No. Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Swift.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Wallace and I and some of our colleagues went to speak to local people to try and get a sense of how this, what the local sentiment was, and with a range of other Conservatives, and we found universally that there was no support within the local area for this, and I do have to say, I've heard some very interesting comments from local residents, some very well-informed comments, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to do that. And I wouldn't want to choose to add to that. I would like to make one comment, though, and that is that our population has been growing very substantially across East Renfrewshire, whilst Scotland's population is broadly static, slightly growing. And we have taken more than our fair share of development. And not only would I support what has been said, that there is no justification for building on this site, it would appear to me, and certainly to other people who've listened to local residents who have been universally against this, that there is every justification for not building on this site. And frankly, taking it another step further, I think we should look a lot more carefully in the next local development plan about supporting building not just on the green belt, but in the green spaces between residential areas, because people need space to breathe and people need space for their children to play safely as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swift. Do we have any? Yes, Councillor Miller.
I try not to be saying any derogatory comments about the company, but were they kindly invited to this meeting? And if so, why did they decline? Because I'm a bit scun up that nobody's here.
As far as I'm aware, yes, they were, and the applicant could have appeared and a representative. I'll turn to Mr McDade to explain.
Yes, Councillor Miller, the applicant and as well as all the people that made representations were all invited to indicate to my colleagues in committee services whether they wish to be heard. They declined that invitation. It's actually the first time it's happened in a predetermination hearing at the East Renfrewshire Council.
Thank you. Councillor Devlin.
When it's appealed, the appointed reporter has to take what's known as a de novo approach. He goes back to first principles, but it has to assess the appeal against the relevant development plan policies and any material planning considerations. I couldn't say what the outcome of that appeal would be, but we have a precedent for the site in Waterfoot, a very recent appeal which was argued in Housing Land Supply, and the reporter, as I said, came down on the side of the council that there were no reasons on Housing Land Supply to release the site, and it was actually an appropriate site for development. So I would like to think that a reporter would assess it in a similar manner, but once it goes, any appeal happens, you can never tell what the outcome of the appeal would be. They would have to have very good reasons, and they would have to probably balance it up in terms of what are the material considerations. They may acknowledge that it's contrary to policy, but if there's a specific material consideration or considerations that would allow it to be approved, as long as that reasoning was given, they could approve it on appeal. But as I say, it's an unknown quantity.
Councillor Cunningham.
Well, I have asked over a period of quite a number of years for a reporter to come and speak to the planning committee, and they've never came. And in my experience,
Thank you very much, and I'd be quite happy if that was minuted, that question was asked. Yes, I would quite, yes, I think that would be quite good. Can we move forward with that? I think we've got another question, please, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to voice my frustration that fellow councillors who all of a sudden have a great respect for the word or for the term greenbelt within our local development plan. I seem to remember sitting around this table just a matter of months ago, and I put in an amendment because of it being greenbelt, and I managed to get a seconder, but that was the extent of it. But I'm absolutely delighted to hear but people with greater knowledge than I around here about the Barhead area. I've heard certainly plenty of very good reason as to why that area is greenbelt. Perhaps I need to turn this into a question. If I could ask Sean McDade. Yes. Could I ask you what circumstances would make this green belt available for turning around a very good, very efficient, very well thought out local development plan that we all voted for many years ago, and for one reason as to why we gave over so much land in order that these types of situations in which we have planners coming in willy-nilly asking for a piece of green belt. We gave over plenty of land, far too much in my opinion, in order that these planning applications do no longer come forward. Thank you.
Probably the main reason at a point in time would be if we had lack of house building and we didn't have sufficient housing land supply. Through the main issues report for the next local plan, we have a monitoring statement. Now, the monitoring statement showing that we have sufficient housing land. If you throw that on its head, say it was showing that we didn't have sufficient land, then that would be a significant material consideration to allow this site to go for housing at this time. But that's clearly not the case at this point in time.
Yes.
Thank you. I understand the response there. All I can say is on previous occasions in which there's been no change to that, we've had plenty of land for development here, and I would like to think in future and for the future local development plan as well, that we begin to respect that local development plan, and Greenbelt is Greenbelt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually have a question myself. When the community representatives were speaking, they asked if we are minded to move the recommendation, that we accept the recommendation of the report of handling, if their additional reasons could be put on the report and kept. I mean, there was a few that they were going through. The non-sustainability was one that leapt out at me, because that was something that the developers were mentioning, that their site was sustainable, and also the roads report where it was the 7 metres stated, but it was 5.5. There were a couple of things that actually came out. So my question is, from the community themselves, will that be reported in the report that goes forward from this committee?
Sorry, can I get clarification, Chair? Are you asking whether you wish to, is it possible to put additional reasons for refusal?
Yes.
It's with, obviously we have made a recommendation with 3 specific reasons for refusal, which focus on the housing land supply issue. You can modify the reasons, you can add reasons to it. You can also obviously recommend approval of the application. This lies with the committee to decide whether they wish to add any. If you're going to refuse the application, you can add additional reasons.
The 2 that leapt out at me were the fact that the windfall site, in fact it was explained in great detail, that there was another subsection that states that that this should be brownfield rather than greenbelt, and I actually thought that was quite a good point to bring forward. And also the fact that it's not a sustainable. No, they're saying a windfall site should be, in the first instance, should be a brownfield site, because the developers were arguing that could be this site, that this site could be taken as a windfall site. So the argument from the community was that in the first instance you should be looking for brownfield sites in the first instance. I did think that was a very good point, and that would maybe be something that I would like added on if possible, and the fact that it was the non-sustainability due to the steep hill. Councillor Swift.
Thank you. I'm thinking that those terms are probably pre-specified, and I'm not sure that we can amend those terms, but I'd be keen to hear what...
I thought it would be good to ask the question, because there were a lot of good points that came out of the presentations to us. So, Mr McDade, is that a possibility?
As I said, you could probably add on additional, if you're minded to refuse the application, additional reasons for refusal, but I'm just rereading the reasons for refusal. The reason number 2 refers to the site being in the green belt, not being an urban brownfield site, a vacant site. So it does cover some of the issues that you're referring to already.
If that's absolutely fine. If that is the case, could it please be noted the presentations that were given to us as we move forward? If there is an appeal to the reporter, for example, will all that information be handed up to the Scottish Government?
Again, if the decision was a refusal and appealed, as part of the appeal process, we have to submit the report of handling to the committee. I would also forward off the minutes of the meeting to the Scottish Government. All the representations would be sent to the Scottish Government, as would all consultation responses. We would also, if necessary, make a statement of case on the appeal, putting our side forward. So there's a variety of documents will be sent.
Okay. No, that's good, because I want to make sure that all those points are covered and sent forward. So if that could possibly be minuted, taking it forward.
It won't be minuted in its entirety, Chair, but certainly the comments have been made will be available on the webcast, and that will be part of the package.
That's absolutely perfect. Thank you very much. Anyone else have any other questions? Yeah, I'm getting there. Thank you very much. I actually listened to everything that's been said to us today. There's a huge amount of points that have been made, and there's a load of policy stuff as well that's came out. The fact that it's against the strategic development plan, local development plan, it doesn't support the vision of the compact city region, and that we've also recently approved 96 houses at Blackfriars Road, very, very recently, and there are existing urban brownfield sites nearby. I spotted all that. So taking all that into consideration, I would like to move that we accept the recommendation of the report, and
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Refusal?
No, absolutely refusal. Yeah, is there anybody otherwise minded? No. Okay, thank you very much.
So just for clarification, Chair, the decision of the committee is obviously to recommend to the Council that the application be refused for the reasons stated in the report of handling, and that concludes the committee's deliberations.
Thank you very much, Mr Neil. There'll be a short adjournment before the full Council meeting begins. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone in the gallery.